Busted.
Oh no.
Well, welcome everyone. We're going live on YouTube. It's episode 3 of the Ramblers of the Round Table podcast, and we're going to discuss giants tonight. So I'm just going to do a little disclaimer first. We're not disclosing anything. We're not saying anything's fact. We're just a group of people having a fun conversation about consciousness stuff, and yeah, just perspectives, and we're just saying some viewpoints. So just putting out there for the AI. So I'm Brett Smiler, and I'll hand you over to my brother from another mother, Scotty.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Scott Nichols here. Got my wife Jackie moderated in the background. Yeah, we just want to have a nice little fun ramble about the giants. I mean, we're diving into all these rabbit holes about the giants and just finding so many interesting topics to talk about. So, and yeah, we wanted to give a shout out too to our moderators. Thank you so much for all that you guys have been doing for us. You guys are awesome. Wanted to put that out there too. And yeah, thank you everybody that's been joining the Ramblers of the Round Table. We love you guys. Hearts up to you. And hopefully you enjoy our fun ramble today about the giants. This should be a good one.
So I have a question. Are you ready?
You ready, Brett?
I'm ready, brother. Ready and ready. I've been looking forward to this one, Scotty. It's such a fascinating subject. I mean, there's a lot of data out there, you know. So yes, question. Let's do it. Hello, Jackie. Hope you're good, darling.
Hello, I'm good. So, for those who may not already know, who were the Watchers, the Nephilim, and how are they related to the giants?
Why don't you start off and take a little bit over on the Nephilim?
Oh, thanks, Scotty. That's a really good question, Jackie, because it's definitely relevant to, I think, when you're talking about giants. So yeah, the Watchers, or the fallen angels, the fallen ones, the Nephilim, they were apparently angels. So their mission was to come to Earth and watch the sons and daughters of man and watch over them, you know, and take care of them and teach them things. But they got a bit horny. They say that the sons of gods and the daughters of man, which is Adam, they fell in love with this flesh, basically, of the females, and they mated. And they apparently had offspring, and these offspring were known as the Nephilim, which were known as huge giants. And it is spoken about in the Bible, also in the Book of Enoch, which is an interesting read. You know, it all sort of connects. And even there was in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there also was another book found missing, which was the Book of the Giants. So all of this talks of this time. So the Nephilim they were basically the offspring, and they mated, and they had huge, giant, powerful offspring. And it's said that there's you hear two kinds of stories, as always, perspective and polarity. The stories that they were very bad, and they taught humans how to war and battle, and they enslaved them. And they taught them abortion and stuff like this, and the bad stuff and greed. And there's another side that they went and built, and they were known as the great builder race also as well. And they taught astronomy, helped build these temples, stone circles that we find scattered all across the world. And they were people of peace and teaching knowledge, but it was maybe forbidden knowledge. Who knows? You know, it sounds to me like some kind of open contact in a way. There was a time when beings of a higher consciousness, let's say, maybe came, and they maybe interfered with humanity. We hear this in the Sumerian texts about all in our DNA and being created in that sense. And this could be the stories that go back to this. So, yeah, the Nephilim is a very fascinating subject and a very interesting story. And it's not the only story, as you well know, going on to giants. But my belief would be it's probably one of the oldest, what goes back to some kind of origin story of when something begun on Earth, and that may have been, but before, well, it says that the giants were realmed before the Great Flood, and some survived afterwards. So that would take it at least, could be 20,000 years we could be talking. But when you look at the Sumerian kings list and the Egyptian kings, and some of these go back thousands of years, they tell us that the part of the kings list they know is exact, which they know about, and they can find records. And it gets to these crazy times where some of them are ruling for Gilgamesh, which we'll talk about later. 120 years he ruled for. And there's other ones, 250 years, 350. If you go back on this time, we could be talking hundreds of thousands of years, if that timeline is correct. But scholars say that part of it's correct, but the other bit, they just made the other part of it. So they had a king's list that is exact, precise. But the older it gets, they just made that up because it doesn't fit into the narrative that we believe on planet Earth. So I hope that's something about the Nephilim. But have you got anything to add, bro?
Yeah, it's kind of like the story of David and Goliath, you know. Even the Bible talks about giants. And I mean, to see this coming up in the Bible is, you know, it's not just once that it comes up, because Goliath was said to have fought David, and David killed Goliath. Well, David also, him and his servants, what I would take as his other warriors, they were said to have killed Goliath's brothers. So that there goes, Goliath had brothers, and Goliath's mother, I believe her name was Orphus or Orphia. He had a mother, and so it starts showing. And the father, he had a father, he had brothers, he had relatives. So that goes on to, were they Nephilim? Because there's so many different giants, and then they were all slain. So, and then even in the story there, it's very you know, contradicting, because you'll hear about David through the Bible, through everything, that he killed Goliath. And then you have another story that says that Elana was the man that killed Goliath. And I started looking up some of that, and I was like, well, wow, I find that very interesting, because they said that they wrote it down that way because it looked like, you know, an underdog, David, somebody much smaller, was able to kill him. That's how strong the Lord, and how much to have the Lord's faith, and how strong you can be. And they showed more of an underdog story. But it does go on to say that there were other giants. There was his brothers, and then supposedly his brothers got killed. So now you have all of these giants and these Nephilim, I would think. And so what happened, you know, once they were being killed, did they take off? Because the Philistines talked about, because Goliath was one of the Philistines, did they get pushed back into caves? I mean, were they used as instruments for battle? I mean, it sure seemed like it, because here's Goliath that's taken on a whole army. And then you have stories of giants in caves. Then all of a sudden they get pushed back to these caves. So yeah, it's kind of like the Nephilim with the Bible. I mean, the Bible tells stories, like you're saying, Nephilim, you have the, you know, their fathers were the Watchers, and then Nephilim had the Anakim. So then you just have all these different stories of giants, even coming from the Bible. You want to key in on that too?
Another thing I would add to it, does seem like some kind of bloodline, or ancient bloodline for sure, and we do hear about this a lot, these special bloodlines. And I wanted to say the Watchers, or the fallen angels, the fallen ones, it says in the book of Enoch there was 200 of them that come down. So that's a fair number in a sense, you know. So then so they would have been the pure DNA on that sense, and then they mated with the flesh of the daughters, which created these Nephilim giants. So, you know, there could be a very, what I'm saying there could be a very spectrum of bloodline there. Not so because there was 200 of these beings, we don't know what these beings were, you know. Was that different species? I mean, this is what I'm getting at. Was this some kind of high frequential being, which people call angels? But then how would they mate? You know, why would they fall for the flesh if they're, you know, balls of light? It doesn't make too much sense. So it sounds like they might have been biological, is what I'm getting to. And if there was 200 of these fallen angels, they might not have been one species of, like, say, 200, I don't know, reptilians as an example. It might have been different, and they had different offspring. You know, that would make some kind of sense. But yeah, it's definitely some kind of bloodline. And we got stories from way back now to the start of so-called man, and we've got coming all the way up to modern days, we found. And so I know Scotty was the same as me. It's one of these subjects, I'm sure if anyone's looked into it, that you can just keep going. It's a rabbit hole that doesn't end, and there's a lot of tangible evidence, and it's quite clear that certainly, you know, we have gigantism anyway coming back in the DNA and throwing out. So it's not that much of a crazy idea. But yeah, I just wanted to add that, Scott. It was 200 of them was dropped down, so that could, you know, that was something interesting, I thought.
Yeah, I got a great story about the Nephilim too. It's you know, over in Malta. So there was a farmer that was sleeping. He tells the story of he was sleeping, and he hears a loud thundering outside. So he runs outside. His family's still sleeping. He goes out, and the full moon had just passed. So it should be pitch dark outside, but instead his field is lit up orange. And he looks up and he sees this huge ball of fire coming from the sky. And he's watching it, and he's seen meteors and he's seen asteroids fall into the earth before. Well, he sees this huge ball of fire with fire trail coming behind it. And he's like, oh no, I think it's going to hit the island. And so he looks back and he's like, I don't have enough time to run in and tell my family. And he's watching it and it hits the island and he sees this big pile of smoke and fire come up. And next thing you know, it just dissipates and it's gone. And he turns around and looks towards his house and his wife is standing in the doorway. And he was just about to talk to her and he sees the fear in her face and she's looking not at him, but through him, behind him. And so he turns around and he sees this huge giant figure of a person that's taller than the trees coming towards him. So he's scared. And next thing you know, a giant woman named Sansuna comes up to him and says, hi, I'm from the Nephilim and I'm here to protect you. And I'm going to build temples. And next thing you know, he was like, well, that's a great idea because, you know, we're an island in the sea and we're being attacked from every which way. And so he thought it was a great idea. Here's this huge warrior woman that will protect him. And the cool thing is, you know, that's talked about. And then it sounds like a, you know, just a myth. It just sounds so fairy tale-ish. But then they found on the island of Malta there, they found, it was said that she had built 30 different temples. Well, 7 of them have been found. And then the story had talked about that she would carry her baby. So there's an offspring. So they did have, you know, that's a Nephilim offspring. There we go with the Anakim. So it was said that she was carrying her baby and carrying huge stones. And she built these temples and some of them were 3 stories high. And they didn't have that technology. They were all farmers and stuff. They didn't have the technology to build these huge structures. So that's another story that leads into the Nephilim, but it's a woman. I mean, that's not too often that we hear stories of a woman giant. We always hear of man giants, Goliath. You got Gilgamesh. I mean, you've got all these men giants, but we don't really have any stories about a female. Now we do. There is one, and they actually found a big statue of a woman's legs with a skirt on, but the top there was no top of the body. And then also down in the caves, they had found like a statue of a woman laying on her side, and it was supposedly Sansuna. So, I mean, I just, you know, I found that just fascinating to come across that. Actually, Jackie found that one, and I was just like, tell me more. I got to hear this story. This is great. I was like, fireball in the sky, giant person walking up. And then it turned out to be benevolent. She was good. She was like, I'm here to protect you. I'm going to build these temples so you guys can worship and so forth. So, you know, it was a big benevolent lady. So I thought that was just awesome. And I think Jackie's got a little question coming up for us here.
I do. There's a question from the chat, the ex-Copernicus show. I hope I'm saying that correctly. So they're asking, how do you respond to the people that believe the beings known as Sasquatch are the Nephilim?
You want to start off on that one? Did you get that? Why don't you take over on this one?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. And I mean, there's a few ways you could go on that. As I wouldn't say that Sasquatch is the Nephilim, or, you know, I think that's a separate being. But some of the giants that did sort of turn back into caves or even into the mountains and forest, they might have like bear or fluffy, furry kind of clothing on for one. And if you saw something like that, your mind might perceive it as a Sasquatch. So I can kind of, that would be one reason how you could misinterpret that, especially if you literally bumped into that. Now, I love my hiking. I'm hiking forward the wood and I see something like that suddenly, and it is dressed like that. You might just perceive it as Bigfoot and run. But I wouldn't say Bigfoot or Sasquatch. I wouldn't say Sasquatch. I would say is a different kind of being. It's like an interdimensional being, interfrequential. And they're like caretakers or gardeners and of nature and stuff like that, that kind of consciousness. So that's why they're often found in the wild. If you ever see one at all, it's very, you know, they're very, you think if you see one, they'd let you see them probably, you know. But yeah, that's one perspective anyway, Scott. I don't know if you've got something else to add to that.
Well, yeah, the Native Americans, you know, they had talked about seeing Bigfoot too. So, I mean, we have stories of all over and all over the United States. I mean, all over the world. I mean, we got Yetis, you've got Bigfoot. So, I mean, I think that, I mean, possibly, yeah, they possibly could have been part of the Nephilim. I mean, but yeah, like Brett said, I think that they're more, you know, interdimensional beings and so forth, because they're talked about, you know, through different places, you know, different countries. You have Native Americans that talked about them, and you have Native Americans that talked about Bigfoot being benevolent, and then you also have tribes that talked about that it wasn't so nice, and like he actually was talked about, you know, being a stalker and killing in Native Americans and so forth. So yeah, that was a great question, though. Thank you so much for giving us that question. And Jackie's ready to hit us up with another one, brother.
So, do you guys think there are different giant species, and would Bigfoot be one of them? Then is that what you're saying?
Yeah, for me, yeah, I think that there'd be other giant species. Yeah, I mean, you have species of, I mean, let's talk about, you know, Native Americans talked about large serpents. You hear about, you know, the thunderbird. You hear about the water panther. I mean, you hear about giants. You hear about Bigfoot. I mean, you hear about all these giant creatures. I mean, you even had Cyclops. I mean, you know, there's definitely different, you know, giants. How about you?
Yeah, I totally resonate with that, Scotty. I mean, it makes sense. I would say the Nephilim, if they were some kind of event of 200 beings that broke some kind of directive that they weren't meant to do, that might be some considered as one bloodline. But I would imagine there could be different species of, you know, what is a giant? It's a perspective. If you think about it, you look at a dwarf, to me, he looks at me like I'm a giant, you know, and then an ant walks past, looks at the dwarf as his perspective, you know. So, I mean, there probably is different giants, yeah, and there probably is different bloodlines. But I think the Nephilim would have been an interesting one if the stories are true. And I think I've been looking at them, it's been getting my mind boggling, you know. I'm trying to connect that Nephilim story to the story of the Anunnaki. And, you know, there is some kind of connections with that. And I do wonder if that's like the start of the story, and then they got the kind of creation story from there that the Sumerians picked up, maybe, you know, and the Anunnaki were something to do with that time. And you know, it must have been it must have been an incredible time on Earth, you know. What was going on with these great pyramids, these giants wandering around, could have been extraterrestrial, all these different ways of thinking and perceiving reality. So they were using stone circles and frequency and their own consciousness, maybe, you know, crystals, stuff like this. So it boggles the mind. But one thing I've totally, my personal view, this is just my view and my belief, is that 100% there was a time where giants were roaming around this earth, probably for thousands of years, you know. There might be some hiding about here and there now, Scotty, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, even like Egypt is great because they left documents on the walls. And I mean, they have what would be like maybe the Anunnaki on this tree of life that they say that they're changing the DNA strands. And then it shows in these pictures of half, you know, lion and with a man's head. And so it showed that they were mixing these DNAs. So would there be other races of giants? You know, if they're crossbreeding and everything and making these different beings, I mean, yeah, you would think that they would have made some small, like you said, you know, if they made it an ant size, you know, we're giants. I mean, we're more than giants to an ant. I mean, my goodness, could you imagine being that small? And then you look up, like we've heard of 30-foot giants. I mean, my goodness, a 30-foot giant that goes on to a 17-foot giant that we know about. What about Gilgamesh, my brother? I mean, we were just bullshitting about that earlier today. We were talking about Gilgamesh, and I know you wanted to spit out a little bit about Gilgamesh as well, because yeah, I did a little bit of talk on Gilgamesh during our mythology talk, and yeah, I've always found, you know, the Gilgamesh story is just fascinating. So yeah, why don't you give us a little bit on Gilgamesh there?
Thank you, Scotty. That was great as well. I totally agree with what you said as well, because before I go to Gilgamesh, I just want to, you know, that was an awesome point you made. It's clear that they were doing all kinds of hibernation and making all different kinds of creatures. And that's spoken about in all the ancient civilizations. We hear about this. So, you know, that was such a good point. Gilgamesh, I found Gilgamesh, it's an interesting one, again, because he kind of gets seen as a Nephilim, but also it's a Sumerian. So that would be the Anunnaki, which does link the stories. And I think it's an interesting one because of what happened around Iraq time. And, you know, everyone knows me. I'm a bit of a conspiracy guy. I love that. I love to look at the things that sound ridiculous and just, you know, look and ponder on it. And so there was before the Iraq war, there was a German archaeologist. I can't remember his name, but it's easy to find. And but most people would have probably heard this. And they were digging in Iraq. and they basically found Solomon's what they call the resurrection chamber and his burial chamber, the city that he was meant to rule over. And he was one of these some scholars believed he was real, others thought he was a complete story. The reason they thought it was a story because he's spoken between 15 and 17 foot tall, and he was 3 parts God and 2 parts human, or something like this. And I believe what can you remember which way it went, Scott? Is his mother?
Yeah, they called him a demigod, and the mom was actually the goddess, and the husband was actually just a king. So he was actually, part god.
Well, I expect that king had a certain bloodline. I tell you that. It would have been some certain bloodline. And this is then shown from the Nephilim. Now it's coming down the DNA, and the DNA is becoming less and less, or more muddled up. So yeah, it seems like they found this, and there's so much, we all know about Iraq and 9/11. We're not going to go into that now, but I'm sure we've all, there's lots of that we wasn't told, and maybe soon we'll get the files on that. So maybe we'll do a ramble about that. But when they were in Iraq, there's a couple of things that were weird about it. Number one is they went to the museum in Iraq. They went there pretty quick. Went in there, there was jewels, priceless gold, all kinds of stuff. But there's a special team sent in there, and they were looking for something. They went underneath where Saddam Hussein had his hidden stuff, because he'd been doing archaeological digs, which were known about, and it was rumored that he'd found some pretty incredible stuff going back to the time of Babylon. This kind of stories and eras, and he found some pretty cool technology. So they went there and they took two or three huge pallet things out. They ran in, took that, and then they left the whole museum, even though this stuff is some of the most ancient artifacts and relics that we've got. They got pillaged and robbed, and they allowed that. And that seems weird. But at the same time, where this German archaeological team were, and they'd found this site and they're digging in there, they went there, sent away all the news people, they sent them away. They kind of set out, and then they started digging here. And also there was leaked emails from good old Hillary Clinton saying that she wanted to know where the reincarnation chamber of Gilgamesh was, and the grave sites were, and they were looking for this. And the question is why? I mean, some people say it's the DNA, which would make a lot of sense. They'd want the genetics, and also probably artifacts and relics and maybe ancient technologies, from a different time. So it's a very interesting, all of that is I found very interesting, Scotty, and I'll be honest, I was down that rabbit hole for days because I just found it so fascinating. And it does seem that they did find them.
Yeah, Joshua has he has something to say. So Jackie's got that over here. Hold on one second. This is from Joshua. What's up, Joshua?
What's
Good
up,
to see
Joshua?
you, brother.
He's saying that Gilgamesh
Brother Joshua.
He says Gilgamesh is like Nimrod. They say he made himself a human Nephilim hybrid through some sort of personal evolution or divine ritual. Creepy stuff. Agreed.
Exactly, bro. Exactly. You're spot on with that. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Crossing these DNA strands, and what were they doing? I guess when you've created and you've done enough stuff, what's next? It'd be like, us, you do enough stuff, you start get creative. Maybe they had a think tank and they're like, hey, what's next? Maybe we should make a lizard and part man. Now maybe, hey, let's make a horseman. And they talk about that, the centaur. And then what about mermaids? What about the minotaur? They have so many different that was actually said to be mixed and seen. And then they had actually talked about too, that, mankind was told not to kill them, and I think that's because the Anunnaki and stuff wanted to study them and see what their creations came about. So they were like, humans, don't kill them. So yeah, Joshua, totally. You got something on that too?
Yeah, no, I'd totally agree with Joshua. I'd say they might be one and the same person they're speaking about there, and many scholars believe that. And there seems to be a lot going on in the ancient. I know Joshua's from India. You look over there, some of the beings they talk about, and it seems there was a time where this was very normal. Even Atlantis is meant to be quite like that. There was very much split in genetics. And even human beings now, we've done this. Don't think we ain't. We've been doing this since World War II. Germans certainly were. So this stuff does happen. And I think a lot of it's to do in them times with the kings and the rulers was this ancient bloodline of beings that weren't meant to be here. They got mixed in. And, you know, and I would say there's still bloodline families to today. You know, it might not be as pure, it certainly won't be as pure as it was, but certainly some of these globalist elites believe they're the descendants of certain bloodlines. So this is still going on now, and it shows the importance of genetics in the universe, I would imagine, you know, because if species from another planet can come here and mix their genetics, it shows, you know, it just shows a fractal nature of what there could be infinite amount of different types of forms of consciousness or beings out there, man. I mean, think about that. So yeah, I totally agree with Joshua. I would say I'm not sure. I'd like to see if he thinks they're the same person or they're two separate people. But stick that in the comments, brother. Good question, good comment, Joe, bro.
Yeah, and that leads. You know, what about the Kandahar giant? That's in Iraq as well. So the Kandahar giant, I was watching the show about military horror stories, and a U.S. Ranger talks about so a squad of soldiers were out in the Iraq desert, and they came up missing. So his squad was put together to go out and find them. So they're hiking, and then they come across military bags, military equipment. It looked like ripped clothing and so forth. And so some of the soldiers look, and it's they're like, this is the squad that's missing stuff. They're like, holy crap, what happened here? You know, something happened. So they figured, you know, the Afghan, the Afghan warriors or, you know, militia were the ones to kill them. So they're following these. They said it looked like breadcrumbs with the clothing, the gear that was left behind. So they followed it, and they follow it up, and they keep going up this steep path, and they see this huge cave. And so they start approaching this huge cave, and they're finding bones, and then they're finding blood, and they're like, okay, this is where it went down. And so the captain says, rifles up, everybody. So everybody's more on alert. Well, all of a sudden, this huge giant man comes charging out of the cave and spears one of them with a spear, and actually kills one of the rangers. All the other rangers open fire on this giant, and they notice it's, you know, bullets aren't affecting him too much, so they just open fire on his face. Sooner or later, the giant ends up falling to the ground. They killed the giant. So then it says that the captain tries calling it in, and he's like, Echo 9, Echo 7427. One of our Marines are down with, you know, that was speared. And they were like, what are you talking about? This doesn't make sense. And then he calls in Echo 9747. And they're like, we don't get to what the hell you're talking about, man. What do you mean? And there he's like, dude, my dude's dead. He's like, got speared, you know? I mean, because I guess, you know, he doesn't want to say it over the air that a giant man came out of the cave, speared my friend, you know, my soldier, and he's dead. Come help. So they finally put two and two together. Once it took them a minute, Echo 9, they're like, okay, oh crap, that means you know, they found a huge human. So they call out next thing you know, a huge helicopter, a transport helicopter shows up. So the Marines get this pallet, load this giant on the pallet, tie him down, and load him onto the helicopter, and away he goes. And once the the Rangers got back, they were all pulled apart separately and were given a debriefing, and they were made to sign the disclosure agreement. And so all these soldiers signed it, but the helicopter pilot didn't sign it. So in 2008, and that happened in 2002. And then in 2008, it came out that the helicopter pilot, and he was on George Norrie. So you can actually watch this helicopter pilot talk about it. He said that when he looked out of the window back at what the men were doing, he saw a huge hand with 6 digits, and he had also saw a foot with 6 digits. That's how big this man, this giant was that was being loaded into his helicopter. So, and then that goes into the story of Iraq. People were talking about that they would give offerings from this village of people to a giant. And one guy talks about it, and he talks about it on a podcast, that it was his grandmother left down the story to his dad, and his dad had told him the story about that his grandmother was into the dark arts and so forth in Iraq, and she would leave a goat pinned up, and they would hear the goat start crying and stuff. And when the dad had asked, why, you know, why do we do this, grandma? And it said, so he doesn't, you know, so it doesn't come down and mess with us. We give offerings, and I guess everybody in the village was, partaking in giving sacrifices to a giant. So, oh, Jackie's got something.
And they saw black shadows, and they referred to them as the black fire Nephs, as in the Nephilim.
Yep. So there's more on the Nephilim.
Yeah, and also with that, the ones in Iraq and Afghanistan, Scotty, I'm sure these ones had the red hair, 2 sets of teeth, the 6 fingers, which I was born on one of my hands, actually, 6 fingers on my right hand. It was chopped off. I still had the finger, the thumb was chopped off when I was a baby, no choice of mine. And I had blonde hair and the blue eyes. And this is something that comes up again a lot with the offspring was, and a lot of the giants where there was red-haired, green eyes, 2 sets of teeth, 6 fingers, 6 toes, blonde hair, blue eyes, or blonde hair, moon eyes, and the same digits and same 2 sets of teeth. So that's and we can see a lot of evidence around the world on that. So a lot of the giants that have been found quite often have had elonged skulls. And again, this would be the bloodline coming down. This bloodline might be from thousands of years to when they've come to these elonged skulls. But quite often they have the red hair still on there, and they've DNA tested them, and they've either been blonde hair, blue eyes, or the other, So there's something very interesting there that shows some kind of genetics, in my opinion.
So the ex-copper, he says, how you doing, ex-copper? Have you heard theories that the Pink Salt Mountains are where giant remains are? So actually, I haven't heard anything about the Pink Salt Mountains, but man, I would love for you to tell us. So, but hey, Brett, have you heard about the Pink Salt Mountains? Have you heard anything on that?
I may have done. I mean, the problem I had with this, I can't think off the top of my head, but I might have heard the story because I went into so much on it. I mean, there's a lot. What's the Love God Caves or something like that? And you might have heard about this.
Yeah, I'll talk about that one in just a little bit here. I got a good story.
But they were red hair again. So, and they, so there is this link of genetics on quite often with the giants. I haven't heard of that particular one, but I can tell you, man, I could have been looking for months, and you'll just find another one. There's giants being found out, and you go back in time, like the 1800s. Early 1900s, it was spoken about quite normally in the newspapers, like, oh, and a giant mound got found, or a giant body, or the giants used to realm. And at some point they really shut that down, and I imagine it's to do with the part of it gives off of more of a truth of history or previous cycles on Earth, but also they wanted the stuff that come along with it, and maybe the DNA, and they wanted that kept secret for some reason. But yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff you can find on the giants. Sorry, Scotty, go on.
You're good. No, you're good, brother. But Joshua is chiming in again. Hold on one second. Jackie's got that for us.
He was saying that the shadows or the shades are the ghosts of dead Nephilim, because they can't go into spirit like humans when we die, but they suffer on the astral realm. So he knows a little bit what he's talking about, huh?
Yeah.
Me and Joshua have had some conversations like this. And it's the Nephilim, especially the fallen angels, they were put into the abyss, chained into the abyss until Judgment Day, apparently. So wherever they are stuck. The offspring, of course, the dead Nephilim, exactly what that they say they are, the shadows. Though I'm not sure if that runs for the pure blood or how that runs down the genetics, and when it starts to get mixed, that might vary a bit. But very interesting stuff, Joshua. You need to come on with a ramble with us one day, brother.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, Joshua. We need to come. You need to come on and ramble with us. That goes on to, we were talking about the Paiutes. So the first it was talked about by the Choctaw people. The Choctaw people said that they were being eaten and so forth too by giant people, and they called that tribe the Nahulu tribe. And they said that these Nahulu tribe would eat their people. So I don't know what happened with the Choctaw, but they got fed up of being eaten. So they went around and got some of the other tribes, and they were like, hey, are you being eaten by giants? This giant tribe, the Nahulu? And they were like, yeah, we're being eaten by these big guys too. And so they decided, we're going to get together and we're going to chase them. So the story goes that the Choctaw people and them and the other tribes chased them west. And then we hear about it again. Like you said, the Paiute people talk about the red-haired giants and how the red-haired giants would eat them. And whether that's the Nahulu tribe or that's what they called them, it could have been a tribe of big red-haired giant men and women that got chased off, and now the Paiutes are dealing with them, and so now they're telling a story too. So now you go from the Choctaw all the way over to the Paiutes, and now the Paiutes have a great story. And so the Paiutes tell about chasing these giants. Well, first they were being eaten by them, so they got together with another tribe, and they decided, we're going to chase these giants back to their home. So they chased them to the Lovelock Cave. And so it was said by the Paiutes that they put a bunch of brush and stacked it in front of the cave so the giants couldn't get out, and they lit the biggest fire. And then everybody called it a myth, and the Native Americans were lying about that. Well, in 1929, I believe it was California University studied it and actually had found evidence of charred around the cave. And then once they went inside the cave, they had actually found, were they mummified, or were they not mummified in the cave? They were just bones inside the cave. Yeah, they were just bones inside the caves. They were 8 to 10 feet tall. I mean, and then you hear of outside of Lovelock Cave as well, in a lake bed, that a 7-foot woman and a 9-foot man were mummified, and they were dug up. And that was right next to Lovelock Cave in a lake bed. So that, yeah, even the Native Americans talked about giants and, being eaten by giants and so forth. And, whether that goes back to, the giants being more malevolent. I mean, it all depends, because we don't know what happened to these giants. I mean, why were they eating people to begin with? Were they just cannibals to begin with and wanting to eat people, and that was their food source because there's a lot of humans? Or was it, more so that they were being pushed around and so forth, so they were trying to be scary? I mean, it's, back and forth on that one. Oh, Jackie's going to chime in.
Scotty, being that big, depends on how tall they are, they might just be hungry. And you do hear a lot of stories that the giants did eat people. But not all of them. Some of them were, like you say, very benevolent and very teaching and protecting even. They protected people, and they taught them great knowledge and wisdom, more knowledge and wisdom than we get taught at our wonderful Rothschild and Rockefeller schools. So they might have been hungry, but like you say, if they felt intimidated, it might have been that as well, to create some fear so they'd get left alone. But also they probably do need to eat, though there was quite a fair bit of buffalo back in them days, so thought they would have preferred buffalo.
Yeah, no kidding, right? You would figure that there would have been a lot of animals. There would have been bears. I mean, you got mountain lions, even birds. I mean, you would have figured there would have been an abundance of
maybe humans just taste good to them, Scotty. Maybe it's like a big juicy steak to me. Maybe it's just good eating for them.
Yeah, maybe humans barbecue up well or something.
Well, can I say something
and
here?
Then Jackie said X-Copper's chiming in. What's up, X-Copper?
Because if you want salt on your steak, X-Copper says that the pink salt is said to be the remains of the mile-tall giants, the oldest ones. So
I was that was on my mind about 2 minutes ago when Scott was thinking. I was just thinking about that I'd have to mention that. And that's obviously the way back. And a lot of these, we've got one in Scotland. I've sent you the picture, and it's a giant face just in the rock. It's in the middle of nowhere, makes no sense. And they think it's one of these giants. And you've got them all over the world. And when you do look into this, it sounds crazy, mile-high giants. But it would go back to the times of the giant trees and that kind of time where everything could have just been bigger, it was a completely different a big cycle of Earth and consciousness. But yeah, you see that, and the salt is, people do mine the salt, and apparently also gold in the giants. When they would cement, it would go to the bottom. If they were stood up, all the gold would fall to the bottom, and you'd find gold in them as well. So, but I've seen that salt, and you can see, and you cut in this wood, and it looks like a giant, and it looks like it's the blood that's congealed in the blood or in the muscle or something. I've seen that, and that's a very interesting point. And that must have been a long time ago. I mean, mile-high giants. Man, can you imagine that? Now that's a proper giant, right?
Now that's a huge giant. I mean, can you imagine how hungry that guy would be? The Lovelock Cave did talk about, and I forgot to mention that they did find a sandal that was 29 feet. I mean,
Inches.
oh, 29. I'm sorry, 29. I didn't mean 29 feet. I meant 29 inches. That 29 feet. My goodness, that would be one big ass foot coming at you, right? Well, I meant 29 inches, but they found a sandal that was 29 inches. I mean, that is a big foot. I mean, I wear size 13s and I feel like I got boats on my feet. I mean, let alone, 29 inches. My goodness, you are a giant. There's no way that you are not a giant with a size 29.
So
Well, you
Joshua,
know what they
Joshua,
say about big. You know what they say about big feet, Scotty. So fuck me, you can only imagine. But that's an interesting fact because they have found so many artifacts, giant books, giant weapons, giant clothing, giant chairs, giant bed, all this kind of stuff, giant doors into buildings, in the megaliths. You've got giant steps, giant buildings, giant doors, doorways and openings. So yeah, that's a very good point. And I mean, that's another thing I was quite interested in, was looking at this kind of height differences, about how big were these giants. And again, it seems to be, you go back, they got taller and they got a bit smaller through time, Further, you go like to Gilgamesh, you got 17 feet, but then you hear these 30 footers, these mile high ones, which I mean, just mind blowing to even imagine that. But then you come down into more modern, it's around the 10 foot suddenly. There's a lot of 10 foot, and then it even goes down to 8 foot, and you can find like whole tribes. So the bloodline, obviously, maybe they done this, maybe they were mating with smaller, like less tall to try and hide themselves. I don't know, but it seemed the height seemed to shrink, and from there, maybe it's the bloodline just becoming less and less pure, maybe as they had less of their DNA to mate with, so they're mixing it more into the human DNA. But yeah, very interesting stuff, my man.
Yeah, that goes on to like I got a good story about Ferdinand Magellan. I mean, he set sail. King Charles V funded this sail around the world. They wanted to circumnavigate the world, and they wanted to spread Christianity throughout the world. And so Magellan set out with 5 ships. Well, they end up making it to Argentina, the island of Argentina, and they pull up, they're sailing into the island of Argentina, and they see a huge man on the shore. And this guy sees them, and he starts like doing a little jig. He starts dancing, and he's throwing sand up in the air. He's super excited to see him. He's like, and so Ferdinand Magellan was like, I pick you. You're gonna get in that rowboat. You're gonna row ashore, and you're gonna mimic what he's doing and see if he's friendly. I mean, could you imagine being the dude that got picked to go ashore and have to do a little jig and hope this big guy ain't going to crush you or eat you or something? So he gets picked and he goes there and he's probably shaking in his boots, but he does a little jig and starts throwing some sand. And the giant's like, yeah, right on, man. This is fun. And so the giant approaches him and he's like pointing at him like, pointing at him, and he points to the stars. And the crewmate's like, no, man, I'm not from the stars. I'm from over at Spain. I'm across the ocean. And so he signals to the rest of the crew, hey, come on aboard, come on ashore. And so some of the crew comes ashore, and the giant's pointing, and the giant wants to lead them somewhere. And they're like, all right, let's go. So the giant leads them. They're tracking through the forest or whatever, and they come across a tribe of big giant people. And all these giant people are excited. They're like, hey, so they must have been told, might have been passed down through their lineage that, regular sized humans are from the stars. So these giants are excited that these humans are here. That the regular sized humans are here. So then I guess they end up talking the giant into coming back with them. So it's written down by Antonio Pigafetta. It wasn't written by Magellan. There was actually somebody to actually document the circumnavigation of the world. So Antonio Pigafetta writes down that the giant got aboard the Santiago and sailed back to Spain. Well, it was said that the giant died along the way, and I didn't see where it said that the remains of the giant went, whether they kept him with them and they took him, or whether they tossed him over the sea, because that would have been a stinky ride.
Yeah, like you said, Scotty, you certainly wouldn't want to be the one chosen for that one. Going through to stand up, though. Yeah, no, that's very interesting, mate. I love that story.
Yeah, it said that Ferdinand Magellan then went on to the Philippines, and he was killed. So he never even made it back to document or tell anything. So when I guess they landed in the Philippines, they got some tribes to convert over to Christianity. And then one of the tribes was a cannibalistic tribe, and they weren't they weren't aware of that. But when they went to go try to confront this tribe to try to convert them over to Christianity, I think his name was Lapu, was the chief of that tribe, and they attacked Magellan and his group. Well, Magellan was said to get first an arrow in the arm, and then his leg was cut. And then the other tribe that was already converted over to Christianity came running in to try to aid Magellan. Well, they were killed as well. Magellan was killed and was said to have his head chopped off, and said that they ate him. And but Antonio Pigafetta, when I believe it was like 18 other men made it back to the ship and cut back to Spain, they had to go back and tell about Magellan being killed by this tribe of cannibals. So that story, was pretty crazy. It leads off from the giants or whatever, but it was just a continuation of what happened to Ferdinand Magellan, because I didn't know what happened to him after, I was like, what happened to him after they got this giant aboard, and, supposedly the giant died. Well, where did they go? Did they continue to talk to the giants, or did they go somewhere else? Well, it found that they went somewhere else. They went to the Philippines, and that's where he died.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find out how many of the elites, governments, and people have got these giant bones bodies. They seem highly interested in them, and I mean, the same as in Egypt. You can clearly see pictures and evidence and writings that there were giants back then. So, I mean, almost every single megalithic structure has some reference to giants helping build it, which would make a lot of sense. It's the same in Scotland. We got all these beautiful stone circles around here, and in the whole of the UK actually, but there's most of them are in Scotland, and they haven't even all been found or documented. But almost every single one of them, when they talk about the myth of how they were created, it was about a red-haired, green-eyed giant. And quite often the fae or fairies were involved. These two kind of beings were building all the stone circles, which again links it to the megaliths, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm sure there was different techniques and technologies used. It was probably some different species, but it certainly wouldn't have helped to have giants that could have just picked it up and plopped it up there. And quite often you hear that they use the stones and rocks from this, like in Stonehenge, for example, a lot of them stones come from Scotland, which for me to go, it'd take me like 12 hours to drive to where it is on a straight motorway. They wouldn't have had roads or anything, and these stones are huge. But, if you're lunking it on your shoulder, it's a different matter, isn't it, So it does intrigue me to what part they did, and if they were this ancient builder race, which again would show clarity of them. There were some that were great builders, and because you have to know the stars, you have to have knowledge and mathematics and skill to build these things. Well, we couldn't build some of them now with our technologies, even using lasers. We couldn't get it quite as right as they did. It's incredible. But also, like you say, you've got these more wild ones that seem, maybe they chose. Maybe after the flood, or times like this, and I'm just spitballing now, maybe some of them chose to restart and help other places, and others decided to hide within tribes, and they went maybe more wild instead of, they went into hunting, and over time they just became more wild, maybe.
Yeah, because like in, Sansuna, the story of Sansuna, it shows a Nephilim, because she tells them, I'm a Nephilim. But she's benevolent, she's not bad. She comes with good things, protection. She comes with wanting to help them, and like you said, passing down what knowledge that she had. I mean, that goes to showing that some giants possibly were good, and then that goes on to even with Goliath. So yeah, he was in war with the Israelites. But the Philistines thought he was a great guy. I mean, obviously, because they all were at war with him. He led them into battles and stuff. He was fighting on their sides. I mean, his brothers and his mother and his dad, they all lived there. So through, I believe it was Gath, but they lived there as well. So, I mean, they lived, that's talking about, that's not too much said in the Bible, but they lived with the Philistines. So they weren't just eating them or anything. And they didn't, say that they're going to, Well, I mean, there's no stories saying that Goliath and his family all ate all these Philistines or anything like that. No, it was said that they were together. They, you know, they were together. They're on the same team. And then, so then you mess with the Israelites and they kicked your butt. You don't want to eat no Israelites. And little David would come out there and hit you in the head with a stone. You know, they got the Lord on their side. I mean, you want to eat me, you big old giant Goliath. And then Goliath's brothers were pissed off. So they thought they were going to come at David too. But David was like, well, I got my servants. And I believe it was the Elana. If I said that right, I'll have to check to make sure I said that right. And if I'm wrong, sorry about that. But it was said that he helped David kill Goliath's brothers. So, I mean, then you have your, you know, what were said to be bad, but the Philistines were like, oh, he's good. And then so you have Sansuna. Then you have the story of Sansuna, and she's benevolent too. So not all giants were bad. Maybe, you know, a lot of them were pushed into being bad because they were, like I said, they were instruments of war. I mean, they're thrown into the front battle lines, and then next thing you know, they're ostracized and, you know, scared and sent up to the caves to, you know, go dig into the earth. And that's why you know, we're hearing about all these cave systems that are being found. I mean, I found that fascinating too. There's so many different cave systems, and Jackie had found a good one about the cave systems. What you want to tell about that one real quick, Jackie?
Oh, you put me on the spot. You mean the tunnels underground?
Yeah, the tunnels.
Well, there's just like tons of tunnels and stuff underground going from Scotland to Turkey, just all over. So it makes you think, are they traveling underground from cave system to cave system and under the mountains and stuff?
Exactly. Yeah. What do you think about that? Do you think the giants traveled underneath and were forced down underneath, and that's where they started traveling, and that's how they get around more, and they can go from one place to another place, and that's why they'll pop up over here and, you know, one place, and then they'll pop over on this side of the island or something like that, and you'll hear stories of them over here, then you'll hear stories about them over here. Is because they know how to go through these cave systems and travel underneath so nobody even notices them? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Anyone that knows me knows I'm a big believer that inside the earth there is huge spaces and many species or beings that are on earth through different cycles. There seem to be different, we call them disasters, but like it's like a new cycle begins and it gets wiped. Many beings, I would believe, chose to go and live inside the earth. And you know, there would be parts and government groups that have been to these places, but most of all of you mainstream wouldn't know. So we don't really know how it works in a real deep underground. And I expect there's tunnels and connections all over. And I expect in the projects, humans have made tunnels and trains all around the earth and there. So yeah, I'd imagine, but it might not be the only answer. So one answer might be they might be underground moving around. It might be that certain ones went to certain places and they just settled. I mean, and one thing you're saying about them, I would say some of them were definitely benevolent. We're in a universe of duality and polarity. You know, humans, you know, we're forever saying, oh, them species are bad, they're bad. We do some pretty horrific things on Earth, and we have done for thousands and thousands of years. So, but there is also beautiful beings and kind and loving beings. So I would say it's probably both. You know, some of them might, and it might have been a hard thing for them if they were from these certain species or these fallen angels, and they didn't fit in there. They didn't fit in above and they didn't fit in here, and they were maybe outsiders in a sense, and that might have been hard for them. But not only were they outsiders, they had great strength and great power, and that could come of ego and arrogance, and you know, we're more than them. But some of them obviously and clearly did want to help the humans, you know, and went to, and even before the flood they seemed to be, and then after the flood there were certain beings that went, and often it's spoken about after the flood that giants come. And different, not always just giants, but other beings, and they came and they taught, and they re-kicked off civilization again. So, but some of them might have come in and took over and ruled over them, you know, and used them, took over the consciousness. Some might, you know, like the one in Malta, she was a very benevolent. Some of them might have ruled over them, you know, some of the Sumerian kings list and these giants that ruled and these gods, they might have literally ruled, you know, with an iron fist. But it's, you know, both can exist, you know, there's good and there's bad in this version of the universe for sure. And that's what makes it so exciting, because it allows to have experiences and different polarities, and you get a mix in the middle, right? You know, and you get choice as well, free will to which path you would like to take, you know, there's a choice. So yeah, I would totally agree with that, what Jackie said though, and yeah, it'd make a lot of sense if they went under. And I expect a lot of beings. I bet there's a lot going on under the earth that we don't know about. There's 3 times more water. There's 3 times more water inside the earth than there is in the whole all the oceans and lakes put together. That blows my mind when you think about that. And a lot of people say it's quite high, like it's like the core of the planet's like a sun. And it's highly probable that there's huge spaces in there that if they've got the freshest water and they've got some kind of light, not even light, life doesn't always need light, right? We know this now. So it's highly probable there's loads going on inside the earth. And I mean, you could probably find, I would believe that you'd find more alien or stuff inside the earth than you would do on maybe surfaces of other planets, because you're talking closed off systems, which are quite well protected as long as the planet's healthy and safe. So yeah, that's an interest. Jackie always gets my mind going, so I love that, Jackie. Thanks, darling.
Yeah, they always talk about inner caves. You talk about inside mountains. I mean, it's just fascinating. Jackie did a little bit of research inside mountains and stuff. And then we hear it even Mount Shasta, you hear Mount McKinley, you hear, I mean, so many different mountains you hear about giants being inside there. And then from one side of the U.S. to the other side of the U.S., you hear about giants. But we have another one from the ex-copper. Go ahead.
So he says, we live in an electromagnetic universe. It's likely the earth is held together more like a bubble. So think of it as a big hollow geode, which it would explain reports of the crystal cities underground. What do you guys think about that? That was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
That's sort of how I perceive it. I perceive reality or Earth and each planet and body as a field. So there's a huge field of information which is stored inside of this field, which we call Earth, and inside of that there's other fields. So yeah, no, that's exactly how I perceive things, And I would also say that beings have their own tutoric fields as well. So we each have our own tutoric field, which is holding information, and we are shared in a field of experience like that. So that makes a lot of sense. And there's bound to be huge stuff going. We know there's huge stuff going inside the earth, and in places like in China, they're finding these places in the earth which have got whole ecosystems all to themselves. The planet's pretty huge, so there would be perfect room for that, and it would make sense that it would have gaps and holes in it. We know this through caves. We can see this through cave systems. I mean, some of these caves are miles and huge, and we found, we've seen from in Turkey, they've got these underground. The only way I could explain it is like an underground base, which they've dug out of stone, which is mind blowing. So I would say 100% I agree with that, Scotty.
Yeah, that's like Göbekli Tepe. I mean, you have all these, and there's so many different sites around the world that have these huge, huge, huge stones. I mean, 100,000 pounds or tons. Was it a ton? I mean, that is a heavy rock. I mean, our cranes, and then to be able to cut something that precise. I mean, how would you even go about cutting that? I mean, you've been in construction. I've been in construction. I mean, if you think all the different ways, yeah, it'd be possible, to sooner or later be able to cut that. You'd have to figure out, I mean, it'd take a long freaking time. It's not something that would be like, created overnight. But then you have all of these rocks, all of these huge stones that are being placed in, perfect positions to where you can't even fit a piece of paper through it. And then you go on to finding keyholes in the rock formations. You go on to finding all of these huge structures all over the world. And I mean, that's just fascinating to me, because there's no way, like you said, there's no roads. And they talk about that. I mean, we found it super funny that they tried to say that they would have put them in canoes. I mean, you're going to put 100,000 pounds or, I mean, tons, 100 ton on a canoe. I mean, and there's no evidence or anything of showing these huge, huge ships. Where are these huge ships that brought all these huge stones all around? I mean, there's none. I mean, then you even have Stonehenge. I mean, how do you get those huge rocks and then being able to place them up on there? I mean, they don't have cranes. I mean, Egypt's perfect. I mean, all these different places. And then ex-copper says frequencies. Yes, exactly. That's what I believe as well, and that goes on to even the Ark of the Covenant. They talk about the Ark of the Covenant was you know, even maybe used frequencies, because the walls of Jericho, it said to bring them down, you know, that would be sound frequency as well. And yeah, you would think that they would have had to have some kind of technology, some kind of sound frequency to levitate these rocks and move them into exact position, because you're moving these huge stones and then you're moving them into position perfectly. If giants weren't picking those stones up and putting them into place, frequencies, most definitely. What do you think about
I
that?
would totally agree with that. And I mean, we can look at the megalithic structures all across the world, and there's very similar. So we can see similar techniques in some of them, and like you say, some of them fit so perfectly. But again, it's like it seems to me that they were built maybe by a mix of different species. Maybe there was different techniques, maybe sound frequency, maybe even there was some little humans digging out, you know, maybe there was giants moving them on their shoulders as well. You know, maybe some of them seemed like they were scooping it out, like they were doing something to the field of the rock material and turning it where they could almost scoop it out. You can see these scoop marks. You know, another one you can see are perfectly cut, which must have been, there's no other way when you're in construction. I used to do concrete, and we used to concrete. Some of these things are so level, and they're like granite stone, perfectly level, and you can't do that. I mean, you can't do that. With machine, you won't get it perfect. With hand, there's no chance you'll get it even close. You can get it, it will look by the eye. It will look by the eye, but when you actually measure it and you get that degree of taking it, you won't get that by hand. You can't do that by hand. So I imagine there's probably different techniques, different ways. It was probably groups and beings getting together, and they were creating these incredible things. Maybe some of the beings were just calculating where they had to go, and they were doing the architecture of it. Others were cutting it, some were moving it. They would definitely be using frequency, because we know this can work. We can see this. You pay a frequency, anti-gravitational, and it makes it vibrate. And some of them look like it's granite stone, but it looks like it's been poured in a way. So it's almost like they've turned it into some kind of liquid, shaped it exactly, said it again, and then done the next one around it. And that's why they're so perfect. But not all of them are like that, you know. And like some of these stones, even in the pyramids, you got 1,000-odd ton stones, which is ridiculous, and they're up high. And the way they say they've done that is just nonsense. I mean, it's just nonsense. I mean, there's millions and millions of perfectly cut. But what a lot of people don't know about the pyramid, especially the Great Pyramid, every single block that's cut, it's layered on other ones, and they've left opens, right? Every one is cut to the block next to it. Every single block is cut to the block next to it, on millions of them. It's unbelievable. If they had been like a few mil out at the bottom, just a few mil out at the top, it would have been a mess. I mean, yeah, there was a lot to it, I imagine. And what a time. I'd love just to be able to pop back in a time machine and a little bubble and just watch it. I bet it'd be a shame, man. I'd have some popcorn and some beers. What is this? And I expect it to be a mix of species. Some might have worked on certain pyramids, but I imagine it was a group effort. Many different techniques and technologies that we certainly don't know about, or the mainstream doesn't know about. And what a beautiful time it must have been. And hopefully we're heading to another golden age, Scotty.
Yeah, exactly. You're talking about, you know, we're talking about them building stuff. And then we have an actual story of Sansuna from Malta. And it said that she built them. She carried these huge stones. That's how big she was, that she could put a stone. So you're a 30-foot person. You're carrying these huge stones on your shoulder and a baby. I mean, that's one strong woman. I'd want her on my side too. I wouldn't want to mess with her. I'd be like, yeah, I got her on my side. You messing with me? So we got a question coming up again. Here we go.
Well, a couple of comments.
Oh, a couple comments coming in.
Nicholas says anti-gravity, sound resonance, and mind control movement. And then he says quite a bit in the chat.
Exactly, Nicholas. Exactly.
And then also,
yeah, psionics for sure would be certain beings that could resonate. Psionics you go back, they could fix some of the beings if they have powerful enough psionics. They could literally, if they group together, they could think it into place. Yeah, that's another good point there. Well, that's all, Jackie.
Yeah.
Well, next comment.
Yeah, then she had another comment. Go ahead.
So Joshua says, I like that traditional belief that my boy Merlin built Stonehenge using levitation and whatnot. So, I mean, I go with that too. I like that one.
I totally love that too, Joshua. Yeah, it was said that Merlin used his magic powers to do that. It also said, Joshua, that Merlin, I thought that he had made Camelot as well. So I'd heard the story that, Merlin, your boy Merlin, also built Camelot.
Yeah, we've all heard the stories. Joshua and I actually were in Glastonbury in the land of Camelot. That's where we met. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, mate. That would be a cool.
Yeah, why don't we say hi? I want to say hi to a couple people in the chat. Rosie, the ex-copper. We got Joshua, Amber, Carla, and Nicholas. What's up, guys? Thanks for joining us. And yeah, San Diego here in over here on our side, over in California, you got San Diego that even had talked about, what was it, in 1895, an 8'4" giant was found by Thomas Wilson. Yeah, Thomas Wilson. So he talks about giants over here in San Diego and stuff being found. And in the United States, I mean, we were seeing, there were so many. So it's like, we could do, I don't know, another 20 million rambles about the giants, I imagine. I mean, because they go from one side to the other side, and there's going to be stories from, like, if you went around to all the Native American tribes, I'm sure you would hear different things. If you went through to all the different people, you would hear all different stories that were passed down through their ancestors and so forth. So you're going to hear all these stories from one side of the U.S. to the other side of the U.S. That's just the U.S. I mean, we're not talking about all the other islands like the Catalina Island. So if we go on to the Catalina Island now, so Ralph Glidden? Yeah, Ralph Glidden was said to have found giants over in Catalina. Well, then a guy steps forward and says, well, he debunked it, that, it's all fake. Well, Ralph Glidden also talked about, so they called that fake, right? And so then Ralph Glidden also talked about finding kings and queens that were 9 feet tall. And once that stuff was given to the Smithsonian, the Smithsonian closed it off and said that you can't read these files, you can't look at this anymore. So then they call bullshit on that, but then they take stuff that he supposedly found and hid it all. So, I mean, Catalina Island has, a bit of controversy whether this guy, Ralph Glidden, was actually telling the truth, or was he lying, making up stories, because he was also a treasure hunter, and they made sure to throw that out there. He's a treasure hunter. But it said that he found giants, and then that he also found giant king and queens over there, and that he found, it was like 3,000 graves, and that I believe it was like for the next 4,000 years, remnants of graves being dug up. And so I don't know, I believe that they stopped digging, allowing him to dig on that. And the Smithsonian, there you go again, they're hiding stuff again. And that goes to, like we were talking about, Gilgamesh. Not everybody knows about the artifact that in 2021 was returned to Iraq. It was actually Hobby Lobby. That's a big store company. How the hell did he get a hold of that? It's obviously on the dark market that he got that tablet of Gilgamesh's dream tablet. And then so that got returned, it was not supposedly that, and it was actually returned to Iraq. So, I mean, there's a piece of Gilgamesh that's actually written in these tablets that Gilgamesh was real. And like you said, he was on that list of kings. Gilgamesh was on there. So, I mean, there's so many fascinating and true things that are being coming out. And I'm just excited to see, what else is going to be coming out.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Scotty. I mean, the more you look into it, the more you find, and you can see it certainly was a global phenomenon. It goes way past the pre-flood. This is going on before the pre-flood. Like we say, they talk about in nearly every megalithic structure, or these big ones, there would be some kind of stories or myths or legends that go along with it. The giants had a hand to play in it and building it, and they came quite often and taught them stuff. And quite often it was a group of beings, quite often 7. These 7 beings turn up after this this is after the flood, and they build some of these temples, maybe rebuild them. And but like you say, you can see the closer it gets to our point of where we are now going back, they seem to get drop in stature. And again, you mentioned about the royal families, and it's quite often the bloodline families, like the Rothschilds apparently have this bloodline. And it does seem like it's some kind of bloodline from maybe species from another planet. You want to call them angels, I'm telling you on what to call them. I'd probably say it's from a different species from the outside that come to Earth, extraterrestrial maybe. Even interdimensional, who knows? They came here and they were biological and could mate, and these offspring seem to have some different DNA which gave them the right over others to rule. Some may have ruled good and some may have ruled bad, you know, and here we are now. And maybe some of them are still in power now secretly, you know, what they call the cabal, you know. And it seems to me that, or like you say, in America, North America, it was very, very normal. It was very normal, spoken about in the newspapers. They were, especially when they were doing the railways. They were doing the railways, and quite often they would have to go through a mound so they'd move it. Or they were using materials from the mound. It was a big lump of materials right there, brilliant. And they kept finding giants, you know. And quite often they were 10, around 10, 8, between 8 and 10 foot. So, but they found 30, 40 I could find, and I imagine there's more than that. And then you say it was spoken about normally. Even Lincoln mentioned it a couple of times. He mentioned giants when they used to roam around, you know, and see, and the mounds, they're buried under the mounds. We got mounds in Scotland. I mean, I've never heard of them digging them up, but I would imagine and now a lot of them have got trees on, these mounds are so old that you're talking like field with no trees, and then you've got like mounds there, and only on the mounds are there trees. It's like someone planted them there around 100 years ago, so people wouldn't dig, you know. So I would say it's definitely a phenomenon around the world. There's a lot of stuff that connects it. You've got the blue eyes, blonde hair, which I said earlier, 6 fingers, 6 toes, 2 sets of teeth, the red hair and the green eyes really does connect. The elongated skulls, which is another interesting factor. And yeah, I just think it's fascinating. And I'm 100% sure there was a time when giants roamed around quite happily and maybe hiding away unhappily. You know, this did happen, and it's spoken about. And they, like you said, the Smithsonian. I mean, yeah, I forgot to mention that. I mean, the amount of stuff they've hidden, you know, imagine what they've hidden and stolen. And just imagine all these archaeological digs across the world. I imagine in Egypt they found stuff they haven't told us about. If they have found the body of Gilgamesh, that should be the biggest news ever. Why did they keep that a secret? Because they don't want us to know what we are. They want to steal the DNA. They're probably doing something with the DNA, and they want these amazing ancient technologies. Because if species were coming from other planets or other places, it's quite probable they might have had these Stargate technology. It's quite logical they did, you know. And that's apparently one of the things they took from Iraq, Scotty, was a Stargate. And again, we've had them pop up all over the place. Another thing I wonder, the last one we done was about Antarctica. What's the chances they might find giant bodies in Antarctica, Scotty? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I was wondering when they were going to find a giant frozen in time. I mean, because, you know, how they talk about it, you know, that ice came over pretty fast, and there wouldn't have been too much time to hide unless you know, maybe down inside the Antarctica, because Antarctica is huge. I mean, there could be places all over, because, I mean, the United States could fit in there with no problem. And look at all the cases that we have just in the United States. And so the chances of it being also hidden way down below the ice, maybe they're still in caves down below there.
Maybe they're still alive, Scotty. I was about to say that. Maybe they're down there. So I did hear some of the stuff I heard, that some of the giants, they preferred the cold temperature. So like at the Ice Age, roamed around, you know. Though I'm not sure if that was all of them, but some of them certainly seemed to prefer the cold. So Antarctica would be a good place for them. And it's out the way, isn't it?
Antarctica said inside the tunnels and so forth that they found, and inside the caverns and so forth, that it's a nice 70-something degrees. So, I mean, it could be, you know, this perfect habitat inside there. And like you said, not everything needs life. But then you come across these cave systems and so forth that actually have like full forests in them. So to think that there wouldn't be like some kind of forest underneath Antarctica, you know, it could be anywhere. I mean, there could be life and, you know, enough substance and so forth that they can eat. I mean, there could be a civilization of giants roaming around still under Antarctica. And who knows if they have cave systems that make it all the way, you know, all over the world. I mean, who knows how big these cave systems are that are down there. I mean, that's just amazing to me, too. It's just, you know, fascinating that, like you said, the Smithsonian wants to hide that. But Jackie had a little one for us, too. So go ahead.
Got a couple of questions. First of all, do you guys think the dark state is taking the bones of these giants and extracting DNA and possibly cloning them and making that superhuman army man?
Most definitely. Yeah, I would definitely think that's one of the main reasons.
I would say some of the dark projects are, and I imagine there's probably a few agendas that want to get their hand on that. But the
Okay.
cabal, through the secret space program of the US, they've taken control of a lot of the stuff. So they quite often other countries ring them and they go there. There was spoke that one was shot down in Iraq, but before the Americans or the Russians or anyone could get there, that the bodies had disappeared. And a lot of people thought that Iraq had these bodies and they were doing that. And I imagine like certain elite groups and certain bloodline families there after that. And a Gilgamesh seemed to be a big one for them. You know, they wanted that. And they wanted the DNA, and they're probably creating some kind of super soldier, but who knows what will come out when you mix that DNA. And then of course, then you start doing what the gods of the time or the beings of the time were doing, and you start mixing it with animals. You know, you mix it with a crocodile, what's going to come out? And I expect they're doing these experiments. Sure, yeah, of course they are. These people are maniacs and psychos, you know. But hopefully their time will be done soon. Their reign's over, man. No more blue blood reign.
That's what they say. Yeah, exactly. Egypt talks about it. I mean, they talk about how they splice these genes. So, I mean, most definitely, yeah. I mean, they got pictures of this tree of life that's there, and they show Anunnaki, you know, trading the DNA samples. And then there's all these different, you know, creatures. I mean, you can't call it a human. You can't call it anything. It's a creature. I mean, it's mixed with a lion. You know, you've got ones that are, like you said, got crocodile heads. You've got bird heads. I mean, you've got so many different stories there. Did you have something to say?
Yeah.
Jackie's got something to say.
So X Copper had another question, and he says, is there any information on the 7-meter Ecuador giant skeleton? You guys know about that?
Do you know about the Ecuador giant? I know. I'm gonna pass that to you, Brad. I know you got that.
Yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah, and it's stored in the museum. Actually, it's on show. Though I've never been there personally. Though the scholars and researchers say it's real bone. It's not fake, and it's quite a huge one. And again, all over South America and these kind of places, the stories go back. The bones have been found, and again, you find often here the red hair, 2 set of teeth, 6 fingers, 6 toes again, and the elongated skulls when you find them. And they seem to not be hiding it so much of the bones and stuff they found. They're just putting it on show. At some point they found that. Have they found more there? And then other entities have gone in and taken it? Highly likely, but they're not hiding it there. And then, like you said, there was a time in America, England, where they found the bones and it was just news and people, oh, there was giants once. You know, no one was shocked about it. And they really worked hard to hide this. And again, bring it into that woo-woo crazy thing, you know, and they've done that for a reason. And again, it's probably technology, it's the DNA, it's the who we are. They like humans not knowing what we are, you know, we're nothing. They want people thinking they're nothing, you know. A lot of people do. There's a lot of people I know, they believe, oh, you die, you're nothing. It's just random. It's just an accident you're here. The universe started with a bang, and that's it. There's nothing else outside. There's nothing, you know. And for some reason, they want that as to control the consciousness, I suppose, to not allow us to grow spiritually and frequentially grow so we can move into higher realms. They want us prison planeted, but no more. So, yeah, no, I would certainly say that that's right. Yeah, I'm sort of lost my mind there, Scotty, so I'll go back to you.
Yeah, and then Joshua chimed in. They don't want us to know our supernatural powers.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's so much. I think there's so much more to humans that we're being told, and once we start diving into these rabbit holes, and we're actually starting to come together as a collective, and we're raising our consciousness, and everything's, that veil is being thinned, and so I think more things are starting to come to light, and just like we talk about, there's so many different places that talk about giants, and to say that giants aren't real or something like that, well, it's in the Bible. So what are you trying to say? The Bible isn't real? I mean, the Bible talks about giants, giant people right there in the Bible. Look at Goliath. Look at his brothers. I mean, you can ask it. I mean, go ask your phone right now. Did the Bible talk about giants? Hell yeah, it did. Yes, it sure did. And then you have people all over the world documenting it and talking about it. I mean, 1520.
Quite often in many myth stories, you're hearing it, not just the Bible, every single Buddhism, there's giant, China, Japan, everywhere. There's stories of them. Not only that, they found bones worldwide. There's mounds worldwide. Sorry, it's getting late in the UK. And there's these amazing megaliths worldwide, all over the place. So, it's clearly was spoken about, that is spoken about in all religions, all beliefs, everywhere. You know, like I say, even in Scotland, man, it's like who built the stone stack? I was like, it's the giants. Giants done it. You know, didn't take them too long. I mean, it's clear to me that they're real beings, and there's tangible evidence about it. And there has been bones found and documented bones that's, you know, up to 35 feet, I think, like documented, or the parts of the bone make up a 35 footer. But again, they've taken and stolen a lot of the bodies and bones and evidence of this. And why? Because, you know, it's crazy. And like you said, Scotty, we're coming to a time now where we're in the age of Aquarius. Everything's being revealed. The truth is coming. It's flowing like floodgates at the moment. So many people are becoming awake and aware, more conscious. They're asking more questions. They're realizing there's more to this reality and more to what we've been told we are. There's more, which is a good thing, you know. And that comes in with a whole row of new things and new ideas that beings on that we could have contact with, but also our whole past and mysteries of the past that will become known to us. And the giants is just one small part of that. It's a whole fractal thing that's been hidden from us, you know, all these beautiful beings, and some of them are loving, some of them benevolent, some of them benevolent. But then again, that could be said very much truly about human beings, you know. Yeah, it's a fascinating subject, Scotty. I really love going into this one, and I've been going into stuff just non-stop. I couldn't stop because I just got deeper, and like you say, more and more come, and I'm like, this is, man, there's no doubt this is real. This should be mainstream. There's so much there you can find yourself if you want to look. You spent a night looking and researching, you'll find enough to realize this is real. This should be mainstream. We should be looking into this, you know. What a way to bring humanity together, that we find out there's a whole hidden past and history, that we come together in all these different countries and unravel this mystery. Beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you believe in the Bible. Well, the Bible will tell you right there. I mean, and then you have all these soldiers and so forth. You talk about, even for UFOs or anything like that, these are credible witnesses. And these are men that we're trusting in, you know, going to war for us. And then you want to sit, you know, there's certain people that want to sit there and say that they're liars and making this stuff up. Why would they make this stuff up? I mean, these are the people that we're trusting on the front lines. And, you know, these aren't just nobodies. These are actually, you know, you have other men that are, training these soldiers, and they tell about these stories. And then all these different, you know, soldiers are talking about it. Well, all of a sudden they're not credible because they're talking about giants. But you'll accept them to go to war for you and go into, you know, places like, you know, Iraq and kill a giant, and then you're not going to believe them. And then you give them a disclosure order that says that you can't go around telling anybody that you killed a giant, or that one of your best friends got speared by a giant. You're not allowed to talk about that stuff. And then there's other, you know, like you said, I mean, you spend 24 hours just looking at the giant talk, and you're going to start believing that, okay, there's a possibility that the giants were definitely on the earth, and that possibly that they still are down in cave systems. And, you know,
well, exactly. Some could still be alive. I totally agree with what you're saying. But also, I don't know if you've heard this, but a lot of them say they're starting to wake up. Now, yeah. I mean, that could be an interesting topic. A lot of people say that they're underneath. It's like Gilgamesh's body, apparently, from the whistleblowers and anyone that's mentioned that got to see it. They're saying it is unbelievable. It's like he was put in there yesterday, which means, could his consciousness come back in it like an avatar? You know, this is another possibility. And, you know, have they been sleeping giants? And they've been waiting for this time of humanity, and now the return of the giants could come, along with the return of a lot of beings, you know, open contact of some kind. You know, it boggles the mind. And of course, that's only theory. You know, I'm just spitballing YouTube.
Well, hey, that's what we call rambling. You know, we're just here rambling. And Jackie had a fun little ramble here too for you.
Well, Joshua mentioned it, but like he had said in Revelations chapter 9, it does state that the return of the Nephilim will happen in the last of days. So something to think about. Yeah. It also says 200 million strange creatures will come. So I don't know if that's a rabbit hole I'm ready to dive down in yet.
It sounds like open contact to me. It sounds like humanity shifting into a new reality, and then being open floodgates to what's outside, because we've been trapped off here. And, you know, I was born with 6 fingers. I had the blue eyes and the blonde hair, so I welcome the Nephilim. You know, I welcome him to meet maybe I hold a little bit of that DNA that's got past and through, you know. So I welcome a time when these 200 strange species come. I'm quite happy. I mean, I'm quite happy to meet them, Scotty. I don't know about you, my boy.
Yeah, I think I fell right into that same boat with you with ended up having a third nipple. I'm not too sure why I ended up having to that. But it's just these different signs, and I think that's helping timelines as well. And you know, like we said, not all of these giants were bad. There's several stories that talk about giants that existed with mankind. You got Goliath, then you got Sansuna. I mean, and the list probably goes on, continuously, because there's just so much. You could get lost. It would take you years to find out all of this research and try to confirm all this research, because you have one story that tells this. Then if you dive down and you look a little bit, you see that somebody else has said that they confirmed that this was debunked and so forth. But then you have other things that say, no, this is real. So, I mean, it's so hard, and they are trying to hide it, like the Smithsonian we talk about. Why are they trying so hard to hide the fact that there were giants on roaming the earth? Anybody that goes to the Smithsonian, you want to dig giant bones, and you tell the Smithsonian, somebody that you think is, going to come and help dig these up, and then, maybe the giant's going to be named after you. Well, if you tell the Smithsonian, you could say goodbye to all your stuff, and then they're going to come in with dynamite and blow the hell up out of it, because then they're not going to want anybody to find anything else down in there. But I'm pretty sure that they would remove everything that they want before they have dynamited it. But I mean, there's several different incidents of that, talking about how the Smithsonian's just, I mean, I don't know why they're so hiding it. And then I'd seen a little document that said too that the Native Americans wanted all of the artifacts, all of the bones of the Native American tribes returned to them. And then, so the government had passed a law that anywhere that it's found, that it gets sent back to those tribes and so forth. Well, the Smithsonian somehow gets around that, even though they're funded by the government. Somehow they made a loophole that the Smithsonian doesn't have to apply by that. So they're keeping everything that they have found, and they keep it locked up. There's been incidents where that they were said that there's people that wanted to go in and look at the evidence, and they said, well, actually, you can't go in there because there's asbestos. And it's like, what? Asbestos? Well, I'm in construction. Unless you break up asbestos and it's in a powder form, it's safe to be around. I mean, you can put homes were made out of, you have slates on the outside, you have slates of asbestos in the material, and it's stuck to the outside of the homes. And I've had to remove that stuff. Well, you need to put on a full suit and that kind of stuff to be even able to remove that stuff, because it's really, really bad. And so, I mean, I put on suits, and you have on masks and so forth so you can breathe, and you have to remove that stuff. But once it's whole and so forth, you can, I mean, it's on the outside of the home, it's safe. But if once it turns into that powder form and it's floating around in little molecules and particles floating around, yeah, it's very, very dangerous to be around. So it's very smooth way for the Smithsonian to say, yeah, you know what? It's not very safe down here. There's asbestos all over the place because we're dirty. And we just keep asbestos all over our artifacts. We don't really want to touch them, so we sprinkle asbestos on them. We're not going to clean it up either. What? What do you mean?
Well, I wonder how many they've sold, Scotty. How many have they sold to the elites? How much have they still got? How much do they keep? But, I'd say it's not just that kind of stuff. I'd imagine all kinds of relics, from all these temples, pyramids and places are stored, and different entities have got them. I mean, the Vatican, we know, has got some good stuff. And the Smithsonian has probably at some point taken over for that very point, that has this little front of the museum and we're this, but really what they're after is the good stuff, the Indiana Jones stuff. Do you know what I mean? And they're sneaky about it. But I agree with you. I feel that this is becoming more relevant, and at some point, all this information is going to come. We're in the age of information. It's going to be like a flood. We won't be able to stop rambling. We'll be rambling every night, mate, when some of this stuff comes out.
Most definitely, bro. And yeah, Joshua, hey, brother, we're sending you healing love. Yeah, we're sending a bunch of healing. He asked for some healing love to be sent out to him. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to be sending a lot of healing energy to you, my bro. Yeah, hopefully whatever's going on heals you. So we're going to manifest that for you, bro. And this has been a great ramble, and I think it's getting close to time for us to wrap up. What do you think, brother?
Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed that, but I think we've been going nearly an hour and 20 odd minutes. So And thanks for anyone that's bared with us all the way through. But such an interesting subject. And I feel we're in interesting times, Scotty. You know, I feel 2025 is going to be, I think it's going to be a very revealing year. And I think a lot's going to change this year. So buckle up, get your popcorn, and come and join us for a ramble, you know, because we'll be discussing other. Well, I suppose one thing we could, before we end, on when are we going to do the next, and what should we do it on, Scotty? And I'm just going to throw that over to you.
Yeah, I think we should do our next one on, you know, maybe some current topics, maybe some good couple rambles on different things that we can come up with. But mainly, I'd like to probably talk about the current topics that are going on around the world, because we've done it a couple, you know, we did one before, and really liked, you know, diving down some of the current things that are going on around the world. So maybe that one, you open to that?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting time, and we've got some interesting stuff that potentially could be being dropped. We've got JFK files, RFK files, you know, we've got the 9/11 files. If Cash Patel gets in, man, we're going to have a lot to ramble about, I feel. So yeah, there's a lot going on in the world at the minute. It feels like there's a new energy, a new light over America at the moment. I don't know, you know, maybe and in Europe it feels the opposite. But, you know, I love before we end, I love J.D. Vance's, the Vice President's talk to Europe, man. I mean, that's the first, I was at my mum's when that come on. She has the news on sometimes, you know, in the background. And I normally just can't stand the news. It's like bullshit, boy. That was the best news I'd had. Just what he was saying. And he was calling it out. And my wife's from Romania, and they've stolen the election over there and taken away their democratic vote. And to hear him standing up for Romania and talking about Britain and Scotland, you know, it's I feel change is coming, and they were giving him the heads up. And I heard a statement from Trump. I can't remember what news or what interview it was, but I'm sure he said the blue bloods don't rule anymore, which I was like, happy days. So yeah, it seems like there's a lot going on in the world. A lot of corruption coming, which we all knew were there, but I don't think it's more crazy than I could have imagined. I mean, some of this stuff that Doge is finding, I mean, some of the things they are doing, Scotty, and they're writing it down as that. That's how it's like F you, the world, you know, and it's not just affecting America. It's your money, by the way. I mean, on that side of it, but this stuff's going around the whole world. They're doing stuff in England, everywhere. They're paying for it. And he's cut the head off the steak. He's cut the money supply off now, and now they're digging into the corruption. We got RFK I like that guy, man. I like RFK. And again, I'm not saying he's a perfect human being, but nor mine, nor you, nor anyone. But he's doing something good, and it feels like you got the dream team in. So maybe we could discuss a bit of that.
Yeah, same thing I was saying about Elon Musk. I mean, Elon Musk, thank you so much for being you. Hearts up to you, Elon Musk. Go get them. I mean, these, you know, dirty states and so forth, you know, spending that much money. Come on, man. You're spending our money on that crap? Are you kidding me? I mean, I won't go into it right now, but that's wow. Yeah, we'll save it for the next one. But my goodness. Yeah, thank you, Elon. I'm going to give that little shout out. Thank you very much. You know, we appreciate what you're doing for America. Yeah, go get them. So,
yeah, I've got to say with Elon, he's always one of them that's I've always been on the fence with him. I'm quite good at reading people and getting vibes from people. With Elon, he was like neutral. I couldn't. It's like he could put the world in microchips and everyone and brain, or he could free the world. And it does seem like he's chosen that, because he didn't have to get axed and do what he done there. And he is, you know, we're being censored hugely in the UK now. I mean, it's unbelievable. People are going to prison for having a glass of wine and writing their opinion on Facebook, and that ain't no joke. That ain't no joke. They are going for over 2 years in jail for that. And it's so beautiful to see people standing up, you know. So I think he's made the right choice. Just because they're billionaires, and some people think, oh, they're all to do with but these people get choice free will as well. And there has been programming, installation, and placed on Earth. And even the billionaires have been born into this weird shit. Some of them have been MK Ultra, especially like the pop stars and that. I mean, so many of them have been MK Ultra or put through these things on Diddy's and islands, and you know, the abusee becomes the abuser, and it's self-perpetuating. But I feel that good things are happening, man. You know, they're calling it out. So, yeah, I think we should leave it there. I think it's been a beautiful ramble. So thank you, everyone who's joined us live. Thanks for all your questions and comments and perspectives. That's the best part of doing this live, is that we all join in together and we have a ramble. You know, that's the whole point. So thank you for that. Anyone who hasn't subscribed to our channel, if you please could, that would really seriously help us out. We need to build up subscribers because we've moved from Facebook to YouTube. It's totally free and it does help us out. And if you wouldn't mind sticking a like on the video if you enjoyed it, again, that gets the algorithm going. Joshua, I'm sending you some healing as always, bro. Hope you feel better and I hope you get that sorted out, and you will. And thank you, everyone. Much love. And I'll just let Scotty say his goodbyes, and I'll see you for the next ramble.
Yeah, much love to all the ramblers out there. Everybody that loves to ramble, keep on rambling. And I wanted to tell you, hearts up, everybody.
Hearts up.
And if you found value, like Brett was saying, in anything that we're talking about today, make sure you subscribe. And Jackie wanted to say hi to everybody.
Hey, everybody. Much love to you.
She didn't want to come on, but she's got the cutest shirt on. I found her this really cool T-shirt too. Yeah, she's got a cool one too, but getting her to show you. Let's see if she'll. Yeah, here we go.
No.
Oh, come on. You ain't going to do it? All right. Maybe not this time, but maybe I'll get it. Okay, there we go. There she is. Yeah, hearts up to Jackie. She finally showed it.
Why did you do that to me?
Because I had to throw you
Well,
on the spot.
what a way to end the podcast. We see beautiful Jackie.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And until next time, hearts up and keep shining, everybody.
Keep shining.
Yeah, sending much love and light to everybody, too.
I think we're done.